The presentation is in chat. If you want to make a copy of it, please download it. I hope I didn't, I hope I left you from being able to edit it. Thank you, Red. I appreciate. Red and I have been able to work together several times on different projects. And let me get that over there. And thank you to the North Texas Agile Product Owners Meetup for allowing me to be able to do this for you. As you mentioned, Red, my name is Peter Graves. My contact info is at the end of the deck. I've quarterbacked probably, I don't know, 25, 30 different inceptions in oil and gas, jet aircraft modification, healthcare, airlines, logistics, nonprofit, a security company, just DevOps, all sorts of different types of inceptions. Everyone's been different. But what I'm going to try and give you is the bones that we use to put an inception together on. There's a lot of slides. I'm going to go through them very quickly, but you have copies of the slides as well as all my notes that are in the slides. So if I jump over something, one, you can contact me, and two, there's probably lots of notes down in the speaker's notes for you. The goal over the next 45 minutes or hour is for me to be able to condense what is a one-day training on inceptions down into 45 minutes to an hour. And it's about building the right product with a shared vision and direction. Those are the two things I want to get out of this for you is how do we delineate the right product and have a shared vision between technology, our users, and the business. Not all three of those folks are in alignment usually when we get started on projects. I hope to cover inceptions in enough detail that you'll be able to conduct one if you're an experienced facilitator. It's very important to be a good facilitator. Be able to manage a critical discussion, for example, when people are in disagreement. How do you bring them together, and how do you park a topic politely? So what is an inception? I'm going to give a quick who, what, why, and when. The inception is a set of activities, usually a week long. We cover about 3 to 6 months of a Scrum team's work, and typically we'll repeat it after a significant release. When we're doing the inception, we'll put together a release plan, and what is coming out next release is probably in a lot more focus than the releases, say 2, 3, and 4 after that. So we will rough in what those releases look like, but we'll really be focusing on the next release. At the end of the week of an inception, it's usually a week long of activities. We should have the business, the development team, the end users with a clear product vision for what an MVP will look like. I'll talk about MVP a lot tonight. Or the next release if you're more in a typical environment. What is and what's not going to be in the release? What are the prioritized objectives? What do our personas look like? Roles and goals, features, a roadmap are all part of what will come out of this inception and be presented on Friday afternoon to our decision makers, to our key stakeholders in the project. Okay. The core activity is around something called a user journey and a user story map. We'll take the user story map and it will lay out what the user's activities are. Underneath that, the tasks to get an activity accomplished. And then below each one of those tasks, a set of user stories that we're going to need to accomplish that task. Going forward, we'll take that set of user stories and we'll create different layers, and those will become our releases, just to give you a preview of what's coming up. On Friday afternoon, we'll present a showcase of our key to our key technical and business stakeholders, the decision makers, on what we came out of the inception with. We'll present a lot of the information, all the information basically that we've come out of the inception with. and ask for approval to start development the following week. Why do we do inceptions? So many times we start projects off, we start product development, and we do not have a clear understanding of what the business is placing a bet on. What are the business goals or constraints or objectives? What is the product vision? So it's very key for us to come out of the inception where all the participants exactly know what it was we were being asked to build and how we're going to build that. If we can do that, it's going to save so much rework. And really that's the ROI of an inception, is it eliminates the rework and the misunderstandings at the end of the product development cycle. There's nothing like going back and spending an additional 3 weeks or a month fixing what the business doesn't recognize. So this is the way to eliminate that rework, to make sure we get the product right, that the MVP is what's needed to get the feedback. I'll talk about MVPs, but I think those principles are really important to any of the development that we do in a Scrum setting. That is the measure, build, and learn cycle. As we go through the week, we'll come up with a technical approach and a testing approach. And what should come out of this is a set of epics, features, and user stories that are prioritized with estimates that we can put into our Agile management tool like Jira, which is very, very beneficial. Are we going to have all the stories? No. Are we going to allow for contingency? Yes. And I think that's one of the secrets, the recipe that we're about to talk about, is how do you gauge the contingency that we need to add. Who's invited? Definitely the person that kicks this week of activities off is our business sponsor, and we'll have the product owner, maybe some of the end users. A number of inceptions, I've had the end users sitting in the meeting, and during the workshop, they go, well, in the user journey, if I understand it right, you've missed a bunch of steps, which is really valuable, humbling and valuable. The dev team is definitely going to be there. The Scrum Master may be one of the facilitators. We definitely need to identify beforehand if we need the enterprise architects, DBA, DevOps, other IT stakeholders, other teams that we're going to have dependencies with or integration points. Maybe we need to have security guys come in and talk about particular security concerns that we need to address. The Inception team itself, there's going to be the folks running the Inception when I talk about the Inception team. Those are probably going to be led by an experienced Inception quarterback. The quarterback's the person that's going to organize and lead. They're probably not going to be tremendously active during the Inception. They're going to take a backseat role and let the Inception facilitators and presenters really run the meeting itself, run the different activities. Usually the product owner, the presenters, and the BAs are involved in preparing, however, for the meeting. Where are we going to do the Inception? We're going to have a large room to host everyone, and it's going to need the technology that we need to support a workshop. We may need a couple of breakout rooms at different moments. For example, when we ask the development team to do estimates, maybe we continue on in the main room and we have them break out. I'm going to talk about doing co-located inceptions, which are my preference. If you don't do a co-located inception with everybody in the same large room, the next best is a remotely facilitated version. A number of the inceptions that I've done before have been inceptions that are hybrid. That is, part of the team is remote and part of the team is co-located. Those are the most difficult ones. As Red kind of alluded to, that hybrid situation, you're going to have cameras and microphones and speakers and large monitors to be able to really facilitate that well. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we do an inception? Well, stay tuned. I'm going to give you a set of recipes on how to build the right product with a group of people aligned so we are all on the same objectives and goals. Inceptions really started as a combination of design thinking and lean startup on how to build an MVP, a minimum viable product. It's going to be a collaborative workshop where we bring basically technology and the business together, the right group of people that understand what needs to be built, and to give them the feedback on how we might be able to build this, and at the end be able to align and plan what this lean product is going to look like. Successful products in my experience have come out of inceptions. I have not conducted an inception that did not hit the mark on the product. So many times, if we can come out of this meeting with a clear shared vision, the likelihood that we're going to hit the target is very high. And again, they vary project to project. Not every inception is going to look the same. But generally, at the end, we'll come out with an ordered list of user stories, prioritized with some estimates, and a release plan or roadmap that we'll be able to present and give the business, give the IT leadership that's probably paying for this, an idea of what the team thinks it's going to take to accomplish the project. I'll come back to this a number of times. I'm about lean. I'm about making sure that we follow the tenets of Agile and Scrum, and that is that we build, measure, and learn. As part of the inception, we need to understand what the business is expecting in terms of metrics that are generated out of our product so that they can make decisions on going forward with the product, being able to sit back and understand the metrics on how successful the product deployment is going, what are and how are those, how's that feedback going to be presented. At the end of the workshop, we should have a clear shared vision, the user journey, the user story maps, again, the estimated stories, a set of features that will put contingency against, hopefully some storyboards, a product roadmap, a set of raids, that is risks, assumptions, issues, and dependencies that we'll share during the showcase. And finally, a release plan. Everybody's going to be interested in the release plan, right? Okay, how did I skip over this? ThoughtWorks is a consultancy, a fairly large consultancy that specializes in Agile delivery. And Inceptions came out of ThoughtWorks. Originally, it was developed by a gentleman named Luke Barrett in 2004. It's first mentioned in print in the Agile Samurai, which has been in print since 2010. Rasman was a thought worker, as was all these authors. And maybe the most important work is the user story mapping from O'Reilly that was published in 2004 by Jeff Patton. And that really does dive in deeply into this core activity that we're going to be able to use during the week. There's a series of posts that followed user story mapping, and finally, and it elaborated on the Agile Samurai, and they were by the gentleman that wrote Lean Inception. Paulo Caroli has been doing a blog for a long time, but he presented in Martin Fuller's blog about Lean Inceptions, and eventually goes on to write a book, Lean Inception. And the second edition of that is about to come out in 2021. Caroli's blog has continued to be on the leading edge of all this, providing templates, ideas, and advice. And currently, he's talking, and we'll dive into how to do remote inception facilitation. Again, all the authors, including myself, and some others on this meeting tonight, were part of ThoughtWorks. So I've had to thread the needle on what is proprietary and what is not. And hopefully everything that we talk about tonight is in the public domain, particularly Cannoli's work. Cannoli's work, I'm sorry. Inceptions started off to be a 2 or 3 week consulting engagement. They were pretty expensive. It was a number of key consultants, the delivery lead, maybe a product owner, came into a particular company, and they took 2 or 3 weeks to do the basic things that we're going to talk about tonight. And then they did a presentation to sell the engagement to do the build. And there's a story about this you can read. In Lean Inception, what happened is this 2-week consultancy was shrunk down to a 1-week facilitated workshop with everybody in the same room: the clients, the business, the developers, and the consultants. So let me talk a second about why we do Inceptions. And it turns out Scrum and Agile are largely silent on this topic. The Scrum Guide mentions nothing about Inceptions or kickoffs. Some of the scaling methods do talk about it. For example, SAFe has big room planning, and we'll borrow part of big room planning and use it. Once we've got our user stories, we need to kind of chunk them up into iterations. We need to put some estimates, and that's largely what big room planning does. We'll also learn during the inception what the dependencies are that we would come out of big room planning with. Really, what I found is if we do some light upfront planning that's like waterfall, but does not come out with a detailed project plan, we can build really great Agile products. We're going to borrow some things like stakeholder mapping and raids to be able to do that. You'll notice as we go through, I won't read the tips that are on the screen, but I've tried to kind of mimic what we do in an Inception, and that is we end up with about 1 million Post-it notes all over the walls, and they never stick, so we need a little piece of blue tape to get them to stick on the walls. The second thing I wanted to talk about that was an issue with Scrum is there is many times a lack of a shared vision about what the product or the service that we're going to build. And so we end up with this kind of situation. You know, we've got maybe a tech lead that thinks we need to build this and gold plate that. I'm picking on tech leads because it's probably not a lot here. We have product owners that think they have their arms around the product, but are going to be very surprised when the end user goes, "What's that?" So here we have a wonderful cartoon about what ends up happening when we take this product and we start to break it down into features and epics and into stories. And what ends up happening is we examine them deeply, clearly understanding all these different parts, but we kind of lose this high level context, and we need to keep a connection between all those stories as the whole system emerges. And without Inceptions, specifically the user story map, it'll be hard to tell whether the system is the right one. The user story map is written in a way that the business, the end users, and technology all understand the language and what an individual task or user story is. But it does cover the whole experience. So why do we get into this problem? What's the Inception hopefully going to fix? And that is different roles, as this wonderful cartoon shows, care about different things, right? Tech leads care about different things from DBAs or end users or the business. That I've had passionate discussions between the business and the end users. That's great, because out of that, we're going to come out with this shared vision, this validated source of truth. And many times we do not start projects with that validated source of truth. We we also struggle with how do we contribute effectively to the whole? How does someone give input on building a new product? The Inception has a voice for everyone, and I think it's important during our Inceptions that everyone speaks. I wish I had a penny for every time I've used this slide. I don't know who came up with it originally. I wished I could credit the brilliant person. Why do we do Inceptions? I think is really codified right here. I've used this in every one of my Inceptions that I've quarterbacked. And when we start an Inception, inevitably the business, the end users, and technology are all thinking differently about our product. Right? We all know what we're going to build. But what ends up happening is over the first day or so, we end up where we have these aha moments, these moments. And it turns out that what we find out is we're not all talking about the same thing. During the user story mapping, as we get later into the week, everybody kind of converges on what that shared vision is, what it is we need to enter into the build, learn, measure loop. The key takeaway here is what I said on the left side is, and together as stakeholders, we create a shared vision, a product strategy. If we fall short on the other parts of an Inception, just that we got everybody together and they have a shared understanding is critical.
Peter?
Yes.
I think that that diagram came out of Jeff Patton's book.
Did it?
Yes.
Okay, great. And don't worry, I skipped over a slide because I put it in the wrong place. So hopefully we'll remember to come back to CCV if sorry, there'll be a few mistakes. So I'm going to kind of break down tonight's presentation into these parts, what we need to pre-plan, what we need to do in order to get a shared vision, what are the exercises, what are the exercises we need to get that product and technology solutioning done, and probably talk about the UX and testing at the same time. And then how do we codify and pull together that release plan? How do we demo that? And the showcase deck is parallels what we're doing. When we have an Inception, there's probably a set of slides that we put together for each one of the exercises during the week. And that parallels what we're probably going to present in our showcase deck. And hopefully you'll see more of that in a minute. Okay, why do we do Inceptions? Well, I've really hit on all these points already. That is, we need to create this shared product vision. Based on the time and resources, we need to be able to build a realistic roadmap, and a release plan. And one of the things that inevitably comes out of the Inception is we had 10 gallons of things. We had 10 pounds of things to do in a 5-gallon hat. That is, things don't, the expectations of the time and schedule, for example, are not going to be met. But that's a good thing to give feedback on in the showcase. Hey, we identified more work and we need to make some decisions on what to de-scope. Or during the development, we're going to need to de-scope some things. We'll come up with a prioritized set of features so we can lay out a roadmap. We'll probably look at the user experience and a technical framework. We usually do this in 1 week, but there is likely to be a couple activities that we need to finish up after the Inception. For example, entering all the user stories in JIRA, or getting some technology in place to begin the actual work. We may have what people call as iteration 0, where we kind of get our tools together and things like that. Okay, where do we do an inception? After product discovery and before we actually do the development. You can see here the little explosion is over vision and planning. The business has had a strategy. They've looked at, discovered a bunch of strategies and talked about them, and they've converged on what they think is a bet that they want a development team to work on. What is an MVP that we need to test? And so then we do the inception, and now we blow up all the user stories and we get our MVP built and go on and repeat this based on our feedback loop. You might recognize this as a design thinking, a set of design thinking diamonds, which it is. And we're going to borrow from design thinking and lean startup, both those heavily. So let's look at a typical schedule. And again, every schedule for every inception is different. We're going to kick it off, and the kickoff is going to be the business sponsor presenting what it is they want. We're going to spend part of the morning actually coming up and repeating what we heard the business telling us and codifying that and writing it down. We might spend the afternoon doing some exercises like is not, and an elevator pitch, and we'll go through those. We'll talk about the different personas and the roles and goals of those personas, and we'll begin to look at what it might require to build this product, look at the technical roadmap, the UX wireframes that might be available, and then we need to start our user journey. Generally, I like the user journey built before the inception. We can change it, but I would like a rough draft, a pretty good draft of what the user journey is and what we're going to be working on in terms of what part of the user journey are we focused in. If we're looking at a whole work order process workflow as our user journey, it's likely that we're only going to focus on part of that for an MVP or part of a bookstore for our MVP. So then we'll focus in on that part of the user journey to actually build out our user story mapping and features. The sequencer is a way of talking about how we're going to put together our releases, prioritize our features, do our release plan, and then Friday morning we're going to build finish up the showcase deck, and I'll give you a couple of different examples of that. Here is, and let me back up. Credit where credit's due. At the bottom, this is from Caroli's website, his blog, and there's the link to it. With every inception, there's actually going to be a spreadsheet that's basically got 15-minute blocks for the whole week laid out on every exercise, who's going to do it, the times, the outcomes, all that information is going to be captured. But what we give to our attendees is going to look like this, right? The attendees are really concerned at the high level. They don't need to be in the minute-by-minute detail. Here is an example of a remote inception workshop and agenda, and it was actually developed by a number of people. And I want to give credit to them, and the template again is out on the blog. And finally, in terms of agendas, if you really want a wonderful starting place for an agenda, here is the mural version of a lean remote inception. No, we can't read it here, but there's the link and you can go out. And so if you're curious as to how you do this particular exercise, bang, there it is. And there's the template on Mural. I just can't give enough praise to the folks that have helped Paulo Caroli put together all this information. So we've talked a little about Inceptions. Now I need to really dive in and begin to talk about what are the steps that we need to go through to create an Inception. We've talked about why, and we showed some agendas. Now let's talk about the several weeks of work that we need to do before a successful one. The more pre-work that we get done, the smoother the Inception is going to be. If we spend a bunch of time after the Inception starts doing for instance, the user story map, the user journey, that's going to take away from time that we could have used, for example, to talk about user stories, get better estimates, ask more questions, maybe do a more refined or detailed roadmap. So there's certain things that I'm going to try and get done before the Inception starts. Having a very clear vision, for example, might be helpful. We really don't want to spend a bunch of time doing discovery. We should have the discovery, the bet, and the vision available as inputs into our Inception. So, and again, I'm not going to talk through each slide. What I do want to point out is vacations and out of office have been my nemesis, trying to put together an Inception, particularly trying to do an Inception during the summer. There's someone is going to be gone. That's key. You got a subject matter expert, the sponsor, my product owner. It's always a juggling act. So the sooner you can begin to focus in on a specific week before people have picked their vacation time or whatever, scheduled that root canal, the better you're going to be. During that couple of weeks of pre-planning, we're going to go through a set of regular meetings where we pull together the Inception team to pre-plan. For example, to put together the detailed agenda, who the presenters are, understand the invitee list, get the room reservations, probably pump out a couple of emails to help organize and get the Inception going. I'll keep on rocking and rolling. And then,
question.
Yeah.
I see user journeys there in pre-planning. Could you differentiate that from Jeff Patton's mapping?
The backbone of the user story map is a user journey. The tasks, the activities and tasks, really just the activities are the user journey. The user journey, for example, might be I get up in the morning and I shower, I prepare breakfast, and I get out the door. Those are well, I guess I should get dressed too. Yeah. Okay. So the three activities are shower, get dressed, breakfast, and out the door. Those might be the user journey activities. Underneath those are probably a set of tasks that I need to accomplish, for example, to make breakfast. So the backbone of the user story map is the user journey. Does that get it, Rick? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I think I've covered this slide. Again, lots of info in the speaker notes. Give you a second to scan through this. Really, one of the critical moments in the pre-planning is getting our room reservation and the right room with the right technology. And then when we send out the invite, and that invite needs to go out 2 to 4 weeks before the Inception. That is to all the invitees blocking out their calendar for that week. Generally, we ask folks to travel on Sunday night and we try and get them out Friday afternoon. We try and wrap up by about 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon. It is a long, long week. The other critical things, of course, are who is our product owner, who's the sponsor, Who are the stakeholders we need to include? Do we need to include stakeholders in the inception or just the playback? What's their availability? Nailing down the agenda, the schedule. Who's going to actually facilitate? Clearly understanding what the bet is that the business is doing this MVP around. We need to understand clearly what are the outcomes that are expected and the key results. The OKR of this particular MVP is critical. What is the feedback that they're looking for out of our product? The metrics and the feedback loop. Okay. Again, I'm not going to try and drain the slides.
So Peter, the only thing I'd add to this list is an expectation that the group goes out to dinner, say Tuesday, Wednesday night. There's something very special about getting this group together, letting them form as they start organizing around the problem. Then you get them into a social setting where they get to figure out that everybody's a human being. This seems to really, the teams I've worked with, they seem to really gel around dinner time. And so put that expectation in there. On Wednesday night, we're going out to dinner. P.S. The company's paying.
That's right. And I'll dovetail into that, Red, and that is do not skip over any of the icebreakers or the exercises. There will be a tendency to go, oh, well, we can shorten this up to 4 days if we just get rid of this exercise and this exercise. Do not drop, for example, the sliders exercise or the hopes and fears, for example. These are critical team building activities. They serve several purposes. Even the way we do our introductions, you know, hey, give us an introduction, tell us who you are, what your role in the inception is, and what was the last movie you went to see or the last book you read, even if it was to your 4-year-old. It really it makes us all human. It breaks down the barriers, and we're trying to gel this team rapidly. We're going to have some heated moments during the inception. Let's get that camaraderie and team built. Can't agree with you more on plant tours. I'll talk about lunch. I'll talk about after hours event. The best after hours event I ever had was in there's a bowling alley in Dallas. And we had our after hour thing. Not everybody has bowled, and it's pretty hysterical. And you'd be surprised who has bowled. Okay, got a lot of slides to cover. I need to really start moving. The executive sponsor is key, and we need to get on their agenda during the pre-planning. And why do we need them? We need them to do this homework in this slide. We need them to present this in the morning to kick off the inception. Basically, we come into the inception room, we say welcome, and we turn it over to the sponsor, and they need to tell us why we're doing this project. And these are the items that we'd like to have covered. We need the sponsor to be available Monday morning, hopefully for the morning, but at least for the kickoff. And then they obviously want to hear the readout, the showcase on Friday afternoon. We're about to spend a lot of money. 1 week of an inception with the subject matter experts, the sponsors, the dev team, the product owners, stakeholders. Did I mention SMEs? We're going to borrow this business sponsors SMEs for a week in some cases. We're blowing through a stack of money. And if you cannot find the executive who has their neck on the line for this project, you need to stop right now and find out why. We do not need to do an inception that does not have a strong executive sponsor. We don't need to build an MVP or a product without a strong VP that's got their neck on the line for delivering this thing. We need to understand why this is being built, and they need to present it on Monday morning. Anyway, enough desk pounding there. Let's get on with it. Here's a long supply list that I am not going to go through. You don't need as much technology if you're doing a co-located, and you don't need as much technology if you're doing a remote Inception. But if you're doing that hybrid where part of your development team's in Columbia, you've got part of the business in Cincinnati, and the main room is in a campus in Plano, then you're going to need all this technology. And I can walk through that in a lot of detail, but not tonight. These are the room supplies that you're going to need: a stack of Post-it notes, a long sheet of paper to put your user story map on and make it portable. What I will talk about on the technology that you may not realize is you need some GoPros and laptops dedicated, one to looking over the whole room, and another one that you can focus on the particular exercise you're doing. I've had a lot of success with USB lapel mics and handheld microphones. It's kind of hard to pick up a whole room effectively without a handheld mic or a lapel mic. So I'll have one laptop with a USB lapel mic that the presenter facilitator is using, and then I might have another USB handheld mic. They're called disco mics if you go look for them on Amazon, and that's actually passed around the room with an on-off switch. You do need excellent video conferencing. I will say Zoom has a broadcast level that may be available to you to be able to do your presentation, to be able to do your Inception with. Anyway, are you going to have lunch on site, or are you going to let everybody get out of the building and go get lunch? When was the last time you've done a large room meeting and gotten everybody back in the same room at 1 o'clock? Almost impossible. We got served late. We didn't get back for another 30 minutes. We don't have 30 minutes really with this schedule and all the things we're doing. So my suggestion is order in lunch every day. Maybe 4 days you order in lunch. It isn't that expensive. You're going to get a lot more work done. Actually, people are a little more relaxed. They don't have to worry about jumping in the car, finding a local restaurant. Everything's taken care of. All they have to do, get up, go grab a sandwich, piece of pizza, make it nice pizza, please. And then maybe they want to return a phone call or check their email. They've got time to do that over lunch. You're going to need drinks and snacks. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there, but you need coffee, you need a pack of candy, maybe donuts in the morning, maybe you should have tea for the tea drinkers. Next, I'll talk about the different posters that are put together on these large Post-it notes. I'm not going to drain this slide, but for example, each one of the exercises gets a poster. The agenda, we have the week agenda on one poster, and we probably have a detailed daily agenda. The user story map is on this gigantic piece of paper. The raids, the parking lot, the elevator pitch, I'll go through all those. The trade-off sliders, all these things. Something I did not put a lot in the presentation tonight on is decision logs. You should have a set of posters that record decisions that were made during the inception. We're not going to do this with a business decision. We are going to use this bit of technology. Those should be captured. A glossary of terms and abbreviations and 3-letter acronyms are very helpful for folks to be able to refer back to. The business has a lot of terms, technology has a lot of terms. Write them down, put them on the poster so people can glance up. Our architect will likely, during their talk, have a context diagram. That project or product context would be a good thing to leave on the wall also all week. Sorry. The one thing we may not have heard much about is something called a prioritization. This is something that I learned in ThoughtWorks. Occasionally we struggle with prioritization, and there's different ways to do prioritization. This one is when you have customers or end users struggling with the business, maybe we put our features in this matrix to understand, hey, what are features that both the business and the customers think are important? What are the ones the customers think is important? What are ones that we can agree the business or the customer don't think are important? Those are helpful. Raids. We do need 1 or 4 posters that keep track of the raids, and that is these 4 topics during the inception. And we need to revisit these again and again. The other thing is a parking lot. Topic comes up, it's not the right moment to talk about it. We make a post-it note, put it on the parking lot. We should drain the parking lot and turn them into issues or risks by the end of the inception. I see a misspelling. Let's see, just different ways to put raids together, but they are going to be important during the showcase. Our folks in the business are going to be very interested in what were the risks and issues that came out of this. We've kind of already talked about who we're going to invite: project sponsor, our business owner, product manager, end users, customers, subject matter experts, anybody that's a key decision maker that we may need to pull into the inception for a particularly important discussion. We've talked through kind of the technology. The dev team is there the entire inception, from the first minute to the last minute. We're going to have the inception team, that is the quarterback, the facilitators, maybe extra BAs or product owners to help us. And again, occasionally we're going to have to pull in other product owners or tech leads from other teams that we're integrating with, that we're going to impact. We want to make sure we have that invitation on everybody's calendar for Friday morning. I'm sorry, for Friday at 1 o'clock to do the showcase and have the right people in the room, hopefully to be able to make that go, no-go decision. Sorry. We need to get that room scheduled. One of the tricky things about the room is it's going to need a combination of Wi-Fi and cabled connections if we're doing a hybrid event. In the case of the hybrid event, all the laptops that are hooked up to the cameras and to the microphones and to the monitors, those need to be hardwired in with Cat5 cables to the wall, if I'm making any sense. If you try and run the laptop with the camera on Wi-Fi, people are going to be using their email. Other people in the building are going to use that Wi-Fi hub, and we're going to drag it down. And the folks that are remote are going to start getting real glitchy video. You need a hard connection for those pieces of technology like the GoPros and the phones, I mean the monitors and the microphones. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make here. The room needs to be big enough to be able to facilitate everybody on the core Inception team, as well as you're going to have a number of folks that are probably going to want some extra chairs along one of the walls so they can sit back and observe and listen to what's going on. They may not have a lot to add, but it may be very critical, and you need to make them comfortable. So pull in, steal some chairs from another conference room, not all from the same conference room, but get some extra chairs in the room for others. You probably need a big projector. You need a lot of white space, a lot of whiteboard space, and a lot of wall space to put up all those posters that we talked about. The things that we need to cover in the pre-planning, again, we're in the pre-planning stage still. In the pre-planning, we need to pull together our core team, and on a regular, say every other day or so, we need to pull them together, and we kind of have a checklist of things that need to be done before the inception gets started. We need to review that user journey, make sure that it's being done. If we can have the product owner begin to think about what that user map looks like, the user story map, that's a real leg up on getting started. Thinking about the tasks that need to go with the activities, for example. We need to put the agenda together, the detailed agenda, as well as that high-level one that we send out with the invite. Get the reservations, the schedule time on the sponsor calendar for reviewing the kickoff, what our expectations for them, and then also review that deck with them. You can see the different things that we need to get done before. We need to get all those posters made, for example. We don't want to make posters first thing on Monday morning. I have found these are important for successful inception. You need to understand what everyone's expectations are as well as possible before you walk into that room. You need to meet with anybody and everybody so they recognize the Inception team. They recognize the quarterback, me. I've had conversations with everybody. We're on a first name basis. We need to have a product owner from day one. We need to identify that core facilitation team. Logistics, hotels, planes, and trains, or whatever, all that needs to be battened down. And do your homework. That is, do your homework on the product domain, do your homework on the individuals coming, what the problem is we're trying to solve. Make sure we understand, we know how to do all the exercises. And again, I come back to get that user done, that user journey done early. Go ugly early is a term that comes out of Purdue. So we start the inception Monday morning, 8 o'clock. We've got the room set up. Donuts are there. 8:30 people are starting to wander in. We probably asked folks to be there at 8:30, 8:45. Get a donut, get your cup of coffee. 9 o'clock, start with the kickoff. And we've talked about what is going to be presented in the kickoff. What we're going to try and get done during that first day is the shared vision. That is the presentation by the sponsor. We'll do an introductions exercise. Like I said, maybe you make it fun. What was your favorite? What's the last book you read? What movie? What's your favorite TV? What was the last TV series you watched? What an animated fun moment that is to find out what somebody binged on the last weekend. Then we may need to spend 45 minutes talking about what an inception is and what its outcomes are. We certainly don't need to spend 45 minutes or an hour, but try and distill down what folks might expect in each morning and afternoon, for example. We also want to talk about later on that day about the product vision, develop an elevator pitch. We want to have the tech leads do a presentation on what the environment and the context. What are some of the technical practices, for example, TDD, pair programming that the team's going to start using. As we get towards the end of the day, there's 3 exercises. I'll talk about trade-off sliders in a moment, hopes and fears, and we'll do a retro, a very quick retro as folks are walking out of the room that evening. We may also ask for a product demo or a competitor's demo, or look at the product that we're doing a refinement on. Again, we've already seen this slide, but here's what we want that sponsor to kick off with. I'll go through the exercises fairly quickly because I'm going to assume as product owners, you've done most of these. And if you haven't, I've tried to give references to them. And all you have to do is Google is not, does not exercise. And you're going to find all sorts of stuff. I actually got this one again. Oh, I didn't. Yeah, it did come out of It did come out of an Inception deck from Caroli's website. Again, this is what our product is going to do, what it's not going to do, understand what is in scope and out of scope for our MVP or our next release. Big post-it note, you draw out the quadrants, everybody puts up post-its, you probably distill it down. For example, you have several people that say the same thing, just collapse all those onto one post-it note. So you want to do some grouping. There'll be some prizes here. You're going to find out there's things that the sponsor told us are not in scope that have snuck over to the left side. They're going to find things on the left side that we're going to have a conversation about and maybe bring them out of scope right now. Everybody here has probably done an elevator pitch, so I don't need to spend a lot of time here. It is going to be an important half hour or so. Maybe put the elevator pitch template on the whiteboard and use post-it notes initially to get it put together. And then at the end of the day, rewrite it very neatly on a large post-it, and that'll stay up on the wall all Inception. This is going to help confirm that everybody is headed out of this day in the same direction. Hopes and fears. An important exercise, an important team builder on what are the hopes that we're trying to get done and what are the fears or the doubts we have. It's going to turn out that it is a real defining moment when you have 4 or 5 people have the same fear. Wow, I thought I was the only one that was worried about that. Here's what the trade-off sliders look like. This exercise is going to help us prioritize what the project or product priorities are. So many times, this is part of the elephant thing. Everybody has different priorities. We have got to operate on the same set of priorities. One of the projects I did was maintenance for aircraft. You can believe that the FAA and everybody involved with aircraft maintenance believes that quality is the most important thing. No argument there. Everything else we're going to have to classify. There is only the second priority was CX. The third priority was schedule. The fourth priority is, the static versus dynamic constraint. Again, it looks like the lowest priority here that we'll agree to is that the budget, that we have plenty of budget. Important exercise, when we go to make decisions during the project or the rest of the Inception, always important to glance up there. We probably will redo that poster and put the top constraint or the most important priority at the top and then list them down in priority. It's a forced rank prioritization of the constraints or priorities of the project. Day one's over, we do a retro, people walk out of the room, put their post-it notes for retro items. The end of the day, after everybody's left, the core team gets together, goes through the retro items, and we decide what action items we need to, what do we need to change? Hey, people hate this part, we need to do something about that. Stand up the next morning is at 8 o'clock when we kick off the next day's activities. And what we will do Tuesday morning is we'll go through the action items from Monday night, and we'll repeat that process throughout the week. And we'll go through the action items that, what changes are we going to make to the Inception, for example. And we'll go over the agenda for that day, first thing. Now we're into the core of the Inception. We need to talk about the personas, the user journey, the user story mapping. We need to delve into the technical solutioning and the wireframes. Here is a user journey of what it might take to buy a book on Amazon. And about halfway, you'll notice that the customer or someone, Amazon, gets paid. Maybe what we're going to be working on in our user journey is just focused on a couple of these activities. These activities now become the backbone of our user story map that we're about to dig into. It also helps us to validate and test our assumptions about what we're going to do and what we might have missed. Oh, the end user raises their hand and goes, "Did you realize you've missed this?" This is the core of the whole week, and it's the user story mapping. Jeff Patton has published a 2-page PDF that summarizes the 180-page book. Our user journey is the purple. And underneath that, we've broken out the individual activities into tasks. I take a shower and the tasks involved. I make breakfast, the tasks involved. I go out the door. What do I need to do to get out the door? During the week, what we'll do is elaborate the user stories that are needed, for example, to search for a book task. As we get towards the end of the week, you can imagine this thing is pretty complex by the end of the week. We have all our user stories on here underneath each one of the tasks they're associated with. At the end of the week, we're going to have the product owner, probably some others, that are going to reshuffle this column of tasks, our user stories under that task, into what is the release or the MVP going to look like? What might the walking skeleton or tracer bullet look like? What several user stories are going to be needed for a walking skeleton? Here is a description of the goal of that particular MVP or release. Here's the next release. There might be another line and the release after that. You're actually beginning to look at Moscow, aren't we? What must we have? What should we have? Et cetera, et cetera. And again, it's basically from the 10,000 foot to kind of the water level, and then what's needed underneath the water level to get that particular task done. Everything, particularly above this line, the activities and tasks, should be well understood by our users in business, and we should write the user stories in a way that is useful for our users. I'm sorry, let me go back just a second. We're going to end up grouping, this is our release, right? We're going to end up grouping several of those together into a feature and several of these into a feature. In general, I do not want features to span releases. I want a set of, say, 3 features that'll be in the first release. I'm going to have an activity where all the individual user stories are estimated by the development team, whether it's in t-shirt sizes or it's in story points. We're going to take the features and sum up, and this is an important activity that'll allow us to find what the contingency we need to add to a feature is. It will qualify the level of uncertainty for each feature. Say we have order a book feature, and it turned out to be 45 points. I would like the team, particularly the development team, to go down this list and add these sets of numbers. For example, how complex is feature A? 1 being low, 3 being high. And go down and rank from 1 to 3 each one of our features. Hold on, you'll figure out what I'm doing here. How complete is this feature? Do we think we really have our arms around this feature? Then what we do is rank. If we do not have a good completeness, we'll rank it higher, more risk. If we believe it's rather complete, we'll rank it low. Volatility. How much do we think this particular feature is going to change by the time we get to the build? Again, the higher number is the higher risk. We total up those CCVs, complexity, completeness, and volatility. We go down to our matrix and we look up what 5 is. This is experience. We plug in 37%, for example. We had a total set of points of 15 estimated. We're going to add 37% to 15 and round it up. And this is our feature with contingency added. I can probably talk for a whole hour just about that.
Can you go over the completeness thing again? There's a question, is it completeness or confidence?
Completeness. How complete do we think this feature is?
Its definition.
Its definition, right. Do we think we have our arms around this particular feature? And the higher the completeness, the less contingency. So if we're really certain that we understand this feature and we have it all included, then we would put it as very low. We wouldn't add a lot of risk. Actually, it should be incompleteness, right, Red? It should be incompleteness is the measurement. The higher the incompleteness or understanding of that particular feature, the higher the number. Again, the notes are in the slides. So we have a very good idea of what the priority of the features are, how big the features are. The product owner should lay out the roadmap. They have what they need to lay out the roadmap. And I'm going to show you several versions of roadmaps. This one has been well used by a company. It shows a number of different large efforts scattered over several years. The particular project we were working on was the top one. Another roadmap, just another version. There's a wonderful reference out there called Product Roadmaps Relaunched, and it gives lots of different versions. One company that I worked with wanted to see it by quarter. These were the things that were going to be delivered by quarter. Here's another way of presenting the roadmaps, and it's in terms of a MVP canvas, something that Caroli came up with. So now we've kind of generated that release plan. We understand what features, we've prioritized our features based on the feedback from the team, putting their story points on our user stories. We've now got a good idea of what each feature is going to take to build. We've sequenced out our feature roadmap. We've done our estimating, added CCV. The end of Thursday or Friday morning, I suggest strongly that you do something called headwinds, tailwinds. And it will be a real galvanizing moment. This kind of goes together with what we talked about in the fears and hopes and fears. This bookends hopes and fears, and you'll be surprised at what you'll learn. The Inception is accomplished. What headwinds and tailwinds is, it's an exercise where you basically split up a poster and you talk about what will push our project along, accelerate it, and what are the headwinds that we're going to face. You can do this with sailboats or airplanes or whatever, but it's an idea about what does the team, now that we're done with the Inception, think our biggest headwinds or risks are. And then we need to spend an hour or so and do an Inception retro. And largely that's to help us to be better facilitators for the next Inception. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the showcase. And the reason I am is that we've talked about the showcase. We've talked about all the elements, every one of the exercises that we're going to put a slide in the showcase for. The showcase deck is basically a readout of all the posters, the risks, the issues, our user story map, our release plan, and our roadmap. And it's going to be a discussion on Friday morning or Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock with all our stakeholders. And we're going to talk about what it took to get it together, what the user story map looks like. We call it wall walking. We'll go around and talk about all the final posters. Certainly, for example, you'd have a picture in your final deck in your showcase about the release plan and the roadmap, as well as the elevator pitch. Anyway, we're just about done. I did want to say, here's what you want to make sure and hit in your showcase deck. Red, would you kindly just one last time put the link in the chat? I'm sure at this point people have pulled down copies if they haven't. And that is, there's a lot of information in here. I've skimmed over all the exercises. You need to review this deck Friday sometime, early in the morning, with the project sponsors. You need to have a private meeting. You need to sit down and you need to explain to them what are some of the aha moments that you had and the surprises. There's nothing worse than bringing a vice president into a showcase and surprising them. I gave you this project and you came back with this product, and you came back with a 6-month estimate. Let their head explode in private and talk through it, not during the middle of a showcase.
Is this from experience?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, don't surprise your key business sponsor or whoever's paying for this, like the vice president of technology. Okay, the last couple of slides are just talking about, and again, this, if you remember, we planned out our agenda. We created an Inception deck that is going to be used during the week, and then kind of a copy of that is used to build the showcase deck, right? These all work together. The big agenda, the detailed agenda, the Inception deck, as well as our presentation. At the end here, what I wanted to do is walk through the main elements of our Inception, and these are the different slides that you may or may not include in your Inception deck. Who was there? The team photo, hopes and fears, dovetail that with tailwinds and headwinds, our elevator pitch, the key metrics, stakeholder mapping, our personas, our user story map, our prototypes, our wireframes. We need to spend a moment and talk about what technology looks like today in terms of our architecture and what we're going to change as we do the project. How are we going to impact the infrastructure and the database teams is pretty darn important to talk about. What's the tech stack? Is it a new tech stack? How are we doing DevOps? Have we engaged DevOps? Blah, blah, blah. We need to talk about what our test strategy is. Are we going to do hard TDD? Is pair programming going to be experimented with? Finally, kind of what everybody's been waiting for, and that is what our feature must go prioritization looks like, what of our raids, what's the release plan look like. Finally, give me the product roadmap or the MVP canvas. And at some point, you do want to talk about the slider exercise, probably earlier in the showcase. Here's what we understood the priorities were. All right. Sorry, we're just a few minutes long. We're like a lot minutes long. We're 10 minutes long. I just wanted to recap and say, we've talked about what needs to go into planning these things. And then these were kind of the steps that we're trying to get through during the week. At the core of it, again, is the user journey and the story mapping. You're going to go through a lot of blue tape, folks. You're going to go through a lot of Post-its. Do not resist. First of all, you're going to need to have 3 times as many Post-its as you thought you would, and do not resist pulling a Post-it note off the wall and rewriting it and throwing. You're going to have all sorts of blue tape and Post-it notes on the floor at the end of the day. The last tip I will give you is a pet peeve, and then we're done. And here's kind of the outro. My pet peeve is people that peel Post-it notes up from the bottom of the Post-it pad, right? Okay. Do not peel the Post-its up like this, because what happens is when you put that Post-it on the wall, look what happens to your Post-it. It's pointing to the ceiling. Don't do that. At the beginning of the Inception, tell everybody from now on, you take a Post-it note off like this. And when you put the Post-it note on, it will stay flat on the wall. Same with the blue tape. Always have the corner of the blue tape tucked in so I can rapidly pull off another piece of blue tape, because the last thing you want to do is stand in front of a room of 20 people scraping off the corner of a piece of blue tape. Sorry. Hope you all got a kick out of that. There's my contact information. I love doing these things. There are some cheat sheets that go with this. There's dozens of exercises for each one of these phases that we can talk about. I want to return it back over to Red. I think we can stop recording now, Red, and we can go into Q&A.